What if one single decision, made in just a few seconds, could quietly reshape the path of the world's most celebrated idol? What if the mistake wasn't loud, scandalous, or criminal, but subtle, human, and painfully relatable? And what if that very moment, barely noticed at first, ended up becoming one of the most talked about turning points in Jungkook BTS's career? At the height of global fame, when every move is analyzed frame by frame and every breath becomes a headline, Jungkook has always been seen as nearly untouchable. The golden maknae is known for his discipline, humility, and relentless work ethic. Fans praise him not only for his talent but for his carefulness, his ability to navigate an industry that devours even the strongest stars. That is why, when whispers of a single mistake began spreading across fan communities, industry insiders, and global media, the reaction was not explosive at first. It was quiet, confused, almost disbelieving. How could Jungkook, of all people, make a mistake so impactful that some now call it the most costly decision of his career? The story does not begin with controversy or rebellion. It begins with trust in timing, trust in instinct, trust in the belief that success could be managed the same way it always had been before. For years, Jungkook had been protected by structure, clear schedules, carefully planned releases, and a team that understood the weight of his influence. Every step was measured, every appearance calculated, every silence intentional. That system worked flawlessly, building a legacy few artists in history could match. But global stardom evolves, expectations change, the industry shifts faster than anyone can predict. And in that shifting landscape, Jungkook faced a decision that seemed small at the time, a choice that on the surface looked harmless, even logical. It was a decision related to timing. Not timing in the dramatic sense of being late or missing an event, but timing in the strategic sense, when to speak, when to release, when to step forward, and when to remain silent. Jungkook chose to delay something his fans were desperately waiting for. Whether it was a response, a clarification, or a carefully anticipated move, the silence stretched longer than expected. At first, fans defended him fiercely. He's resting. He's planning something big. Trust Jungkook. And for a while that trust held strong. But the longer the gap lasted, the louder speculation grew. Rumors began filling the space that silence created. Media outlets began asking questions not because there was scandal, but because there was uncertainty. In the entertainment world, uncertainty is dangerous. What made this mistake particularly costly was not backlash, it was loss of control over the narrative. For the first time in years, Jungkook was not the one leading the story about himself. Others were doing it for him. Analysts debated whether the delay was strategic or a sign of internal struggle. Commentators questioned whether global fame had finally become overwhelming. Casual listeners, who didn't follow BTS closely, began forming opinions based not on Jungkook's voice but on assumptions. And that is where the damage began. In modern celebrity culture, silence is rarely neutral. It is interpreted, twisted, amplified. Jungkook's choice to wait, perhaps to perfect something, perhaps to protect himself, perhaps to avoid unnecessary noise, unintentionally allowed outside voices to dominate the conversation. The image of control he had carefully built over years began to blur, not because he had done something wrong, but because he had done too little. Industry insiders later hinted that opportunities quietly slipped away during this period. Invitations that required immediate confirmation, collaborations that needed clear communication, endorsement plans that depended on momentum. None of these losses were announced publicly. They didn't need to be. In the entertainment industry, absence often speaks louder than rejection. Fans began to feel the weight too. Not anger, confusion. Jungkook had always been emotionally transparent in his own quiet way. He shared vulnerabilities through music, through subtle gestures, through moments on stage, but this time there was no song to explain the silence, no message to ground the speculation. The bond between artist and audience, while still strong, felt stretched, and when fans feel unsure, even briefly, the emotional cost is significant. The most heartbreaking part of this mistake is that it came from a place of humanity. Jungkook has spoken before about pressure, the constant expectation to be perfect, productive, inspiring. Choosing to pause, to wait, to not rush is something mental health advocates often encourage. In another context, this decision would have been praised as self-care. But for someone of Jungkook's stature, personal decisions are rarely allowed to remain personal. That contradiction between being human and being a global symbol is what turned a small choice into a costly one. As weeks turned into months, the narrative solidified, not as a scandal but as a missed moment. Critics didn't accuse him of wrongdoing, they accused him of hesitation. In a fast-moving industry, hesitation can be fatal. New stars rise daily, trends evolve weekly, audiences shift attention quickly even if loyalty remains. Jungkook's brand, once defined by unstoppable momentum, was suddenly described with new words: quiet, uncertain, paused. Those words hurt more than hate, because they imply loss of direction. When Jungkook finally re-emerged through appearances, subtle updates, and eventually creative output, the reception was still massive, stadium-level massive, but something had changed beneath the surface. Media coverage framed his return not as a natural continuation but as a comeback from absence. That framing, however subtle, repositioned him psychologically in the public eye. He was no longer just Jungkook moving forward. He was Jungkook returning. That single shift in language reveals how costly the mistake truly was. In hindsight, many believe that a brief explanation, a short acknowledgement, or even a symbolic presence could have prevented the narrative spiral. Not an apology, not justification, just presence. Because presence for an artist like Jungkook equals reassurance. The lesson here is not that Jungkook failed. It is that even the strongest stars are vulnerable to the smallest cracks in communication. What makes this moment stand out in Jungkook's career is not the loss of fame, because his fame remains overwhelming. It is not loss of talent, because his artistry continues to evolve. It is the realization that control over one's story is fragile, no matter how powerful the platform. Fans in many ways learned alongside him. They learned that idols are not machines, that silence can come from exhaustion, reflection, or growth, that expectations placed on artists are often unrealistic, and perhaps most importantly, they learned that loyalty doesn't erase vulnerability. Today, discussions about this one small mistake are less about blame and more about reflection. Industry experts now cite it as a case study in modern celebrity management. Fans discuss it as a reminder to give idols space without abandoning support. And Jungkook himself, through his later work and demeanor, appears more intentional, more aware of how quickly moments can slip away. If this truly was the most costly decision of his career, it is also one of the most educational. Because it shows that even at the top of the world, where applause never stops and records seem endless, a single pause can echo louder than expected. And yet, perhaps the most surprising twist of all is this: the mistake did not break Jungkook. It reshaped him. Sometimes, the cost of a mistake is not measured in losses but in lessons. And if history has shown us anything about Jungkook BTS, it is that lessons do not slow him down, they sharpen him. The question now is not whether this decision damaged his career. The real question is whether it quietly prepared him for something even bigger. And if so, then what looked like a costly mistake may one day be remembered as the moment Jungkook learned how to truly own not just his success, but his silence too.